Hey gang, it's me, Miss Letterber. Hoping that you're all doing well and everybody is having, a little bit nicer outside and people have gotten an opportunity to go outside. We are continuing, however, to discuss the unit on the Reformation. And before we get too far into that, we just finished an activity that required us to look at pictures of the Pope, pictures of Jesus, and we talked specifically about hypocrisy. Hypocrisy, for you to remember, means saying one thing but doing something else. And so the Pope was doing things that he shouldn't have been doing, things that he wouldn't have normally done. And so he is kind of going down this path that's not very good. Go ahead, and we're going to actually do a bell ringer today, and then we'll get into today's lesson. So let me go ahead and shrink myself a little bit here and move myself out of the way. So if you are in home, you will go to today's lesson using the tabs across here. I'm going to use the modules tab just because it's a little bit easier for me to find, and I'm going to click on this bell ringer right here. Once that comes open, it's going to ask you a question. The question is, in a paragraph, describe the message of the cartoonist regarding the Catholic Church during the Renaissance. You need to use facts and detail from class to support your answer. So we have this picture here. It was a political cartoon. It is a primary source. So we have this picture here, and I want you to look at the picture. And I want you to see if you can come up with what the cartoonist was saying about the Catholic Church during the Renaissance. Couple of sentences, nothing too elaborate. Obviously, you're going to probably guess because we haven't talked about this yet, but your guess needs to be an educated guess because you can use examples, you can use evidence from this picture to support your answer. So go ahead and pause the video, open up your bell ringer, and go ahead and see if you can answer that question. Okay, hopefully you're back again. When we're talking about this particular picture, there's a lot of things that you need to notice. And would be a good example of actively reading like a diagram or a picture. So we see this, it looks like a church. We can tell it's a church because it has the cross up here on the steeple. Looks like it has stained glass windows. It just looks like a church. And it happens to be on this boat right here. And it doesn't look like they're having a pleasure cruise. It looks like the boat is either on rough water or looks like the church may be sinking. Those are the kinds of messages the cartoonist is trying to get across to you. The church had been so powerful for so long, they controlled absolutely everything. And we're walking into this new time period called the Renaissance, where they're using a new philosophy called humanism to get people to think for themselves. And as people start to think for themselves, one of the things that they begin to question is the true nature of the church. So I hope that you got some of that down into your bell ringer. We're going to actually take two pictures, this picture to kind of just remind us, and another picture and put them into our notebook before we get started. So if you go ahead and, that's my notebook. That's not it either. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, I'm going to go back to modules, and I'm going to go ahead and go here to the troubled church. This is where our information will be. And you notice that there are two different pictures here labeled pictures for your notebook. Go ahead and right click on those and then go ahead and copy and paste them into your notebook. I put mine up here kind of in different places, but you can pick whatever you want. And let me go ahead and duplicate this slide so that I can show you exactly what we're doing here. Okay. Okay, so we have both pictures in our notebook, and we talked about this the last time that we were together. I know that there's no special section for the Renaissance or for the Reformation, so we're actually going to include it right into the Renaissance notes, mainly because it's just easier. Plus, these two things are happening simultaneously. So I went ahead and made my new page called Reformation Notes, and I took my little sinking church, and then I took this picture here and that it has some lines off of it. We're going to actually add information to those spaces as we go today. Hopefully you're still with me, okay? So let's go ahead and look at today's information. One of the things that we need to be reminded about, let me go ahead and get this here. One of the things that we need to be reminded about is at this time, we have a lot of people who are starting to question the church. Please make sure that this is in your notebook under Troubled Church, which would be your big bullet, and then indent, and then write Humanism Stress Questioning. People started to question the worldliness of the Catholic Church. Now, if you recall, the only religion that you could be at the time, if you lived in Europe, was Catholic. I know that they're Christian. That's the type of religion, but the brand was Catholic. Everybody was Catholic. So if you were a Christian, you were Catholic. And now, as time has gone on, the church has grown and grown and grown, and people have given money, and they've given land, and they've given time, and the church has grown just bursting out of the seams. And in a lot of cases, men, especially nobles, who went into the profession of priest or monk or a bishop, these men were making way more money than they would in a regular job. They were doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And so the church was becoming more and more powerful. There are several different ways in which the church becomes powerful. And that's where we're going to go back to our notebook. You have this church that's kind of in front of you, and we need to give it a label. So we're going to go ahead and insert a text box. Okay. And I'm going to label it Driving the Demand for Change. I think I'm going to make it bold, maybe red, maybe a little bigger, so that I know what I'm talking about. And I'm definitely going to center it. And we're talking about the fact that the church, that we need to change. They hadn't changed for 1,000 years, and they needed to change. They needed to update stuff. So, what are the 6 ways in which they needed to change? So, let's start with the easiest. Well, or one of the easiest. We're going to go ahead and insert another text box over here by this line, and we're going to write down the word greed. Now, if you don't know what the word greed means, you could go ahead and look it up now. But greed really means wanting more and more, even though you don't need it. In a lot of cases, the church was very greedy. They were, oops, let me go ahead and make this bigger so you can see it. How was the church greedy? They were taking money from the peasants in church tax, as a church tax, even though they had taken a vow of poverty. So they were actually taking and charging exorbitant amount of money to anybody to get forgiveness for their sins. They were actually charging people to give them forgiveness. And that was not what the Bible said, but that's what they were doing. And so greed continues to expand and expand in the church. Okay? Another way, insert another text box. Okay? Another way the church is going to need to change is something called nepotism. Nepotism. There we go. Okay, this means giving a job to your family member, even if they are not qualified. Okay, so nepotism is something that comes up often when people are going out hunting for jobs. Nepotism is when someone specifically gets a job not based on their qualifications, but based entirely on the fact that they know somebody. Somebody either stood up for them or said to them, um, like, really just got them the job. Okay. Now, this is not unusual. This happens in a lot of places. I'm sure that maybe your parents have talked to you about it at one time or another, where someone gets something just because that they're related to someone else. I will tell you that when I was first out of college, I applied to be a teacher here in the school district, but my dad and mom both worked here. So they did not give me the job. It took, I don't know, probably 3 interviews at different times during over the course of like 5 or 6 years before I was able to get a job here, just because people did not want to be accused of nepotism. When it came to the Catholic Church was giving away church jobs, priest, bishop, cardinal, archbishop, giving away church jobs to people who were in their family. Now, we don't see that as like something that anyone would want. But at the time, the church was the richest and most powerful group of people in Europe. So if you got to be a part of that, that was awesome. So the church would actually give jobs to their relatives, okay, which seems crazy to us, but very, very true. Okay, our third one, we're going to go ahead and insert another text box like this. Okay, and this kind of goes along with nepotism. Unqualified priests. Okay, what does this mean? People were working for the church even if they didn't believe the Bible. Okay, so this seems a little strange. We have a group of people who are unqualified who have become priests because they know that there's money in this game. They're trying to earn or become more wealthy by becoming a priest. That, of course, doesn't make any sense to us because we think of people who work for the church as being poor, but these people were making money and they were doing it um, with their friends and family members, and a lot of them had never ever been to school to be a priest. So we have a lot of people who are running around claiming to be priests who either didn't know how to be a priest or whose behavior was so bad that they shouldn't have been a priest. So both of those things are true. Okay, continuing to go around the circle, we need to insert a new text box down here. Oops, way too big. Crazy. Okay, this one is scandals. Okay, now, in this case, the scandals, more often than not, were happening with the Pope. Okay, the Pope, there were many popes, but at this time, the Pope would get into trouble. And then the church would cover it up. Similar to things that are happening currently. there's a lot of different instances where the church has been accused of um, a lot of different things, specifically involving, um, the corruption of a minor or dealing with um, uh, priests having inappropriate relationships with their parishioners. So all of that was kind of going together. The popes were the head of this, and so if you like Google bad popes, there's going to come up a whole list of popes that were not good. Popes that did things like had kids out of wedlock. Popes are not supposed to have kids, they're supposed to be married to the church. Popes that spent all of the money on fine parties and prostitutes and drugs and alcohol. Like, there were a whole bunch of popes that were in trouble. And so they would get rid of them, but there was still this stigma of how these people were supposed to be leading you in godly, and they weren't. Okay, next one. Insert a text box. That's an image. Insert a text box. There we go. Ooh, no. No. Insert text box. There we be. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, the next one is going to be life of luxury. Okay. People who worked for the church took a vow of poverty, agreed to not have money or possessions. Okay, so this concept was this. When you became a priest, you actually took a vow, you made an oath that said that you were going to live a life of poverty. You didn't have stuff and you didn't want stuff. So you didn't own stuff, you didn't get paid. You worked for God and God would take care of you. The problem is that they had all this money. Remember the tithes that were coming in, 10% of your income? So they had all of this money, and then they didn't know what to do with it. So they started to buy things that they shouldn't have. Imagine for a second a priest driving around in like a luxury car. That's what we're talking about. They were using money frivolously. They weren't using it to help the poor or the sick. They were just taking care of themselves. So this is another reason why we need to have change. And last but not least, okay, and this one is simony, which means to sell a church god. Now, the church was supposed to train the men who were going to work for the church. They would go to school, like seminary. And a lot of people didn't want to go to seminary because they just wanted to be a priest so that they could get the money and the power and the luxury and all that kind of stuff. So, in a lot of cases, to get as much power and money as they could and wealth as they could, they would actually sell these jobs. So, people would come in and they would be like, I think I want to be an archbishop. And the Pope would be like, okay, that costs $10,000. So the people would pay $10,000 and the guy would be archbishop. It's not good. It's not logical. It doesn't follow the teachings of Jesus, but that's what they were doing. The church was full of people who we needed to get some sort of change happening. They had been doing things all wrong for a very long time. Okay? So I want you to go ahead, and I of course can't fit anything on this next page. So go ahead and add another page. Okay. So go ahead and add another page. and I want you to write this down. With the Renaissance, the Pope built a lavish new palace called St. Peter's Basilica. This is also known as the Vatican. In the picture in front of you is just a part of St. Peter's Basilica. It's this ginormous church right here. We had talked about St. Peter's Basilica earlier when we were talking about Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and them creating pieces of art to put inside this big church. It's a huge church. It costs a lot of money to make. So the Pope needed a lot of money to build this. He felt that God had called him to build this monstrous church that everybody should be able to go to. And they were going to take the money that they were gathering from the people in tithe, and they were going to pay to build this gigantic church. Now, the problem is this. They decided to sell something to the people to earn money. It's like they were doing like a fundraiser. You know how we sell things like gift wrap and candles and pies and strombolis and stuff. They decided they were going to have a fundraiser to raise enough money to build this church. Well, they didn't have any of that cool stuff. So what they decided to do was to sell something called an indulgence. Okay. So this is what the church looks like from an aerial view down. This is called St. Peter's Square. Supposedly this obelisk right here stands over top of where Peter was crucified. Remember, we talked about Peter being crucified upside down. And then this is St. Peter's Basilica. Over here, right here, actually, this is actually the Sistine Chapel. Okay, here's another example. I want you to see how big this, in scope and size, how big this is. This is the church, and these are the people. It's huge. It's crazy big. So this is a map of the Vatican. This is the whole land of the Pope. The Pope owns all of this land. It's like a city inside a city. So Rome is around it. So you can see here, this is Rome around it. And in the center of Rome is this other city, this other like country called the Vatican. It is owned and controlled by the Catholic Church. The Pope lives here on the Vatican. So here is St. Peter's Basilica. Here is the Sistine Chapel. Remember, we talked about this, that Michelangelo painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. And then this is all where the Pope lives. Can you go visit it? Yes, you can. They don't let everybody in. They don't do a lot of tours all the time, but you can go here, and you probably are not going to see the Pope, but you can travel around here and check things out. This is the inside of the Sistine Chapel. So I want to give you a picture in your brain of what they're trying to build. This is all gold leaf. So if you see it and it looks gold, it is actually gold. This is the inside of the church. You can see it's just painted with these amazing frescoes. It was absolutely gorgeous. And to give you a understanding of size and scope of what it looks like, this is the inside. So this is where the people would go in and sit down. And then this right here, this is where the altar is. So the altar is here, and these are all places where people sit. Okay, I'm going to move up closer to the altar so you can see how big it is. This is the altar. It's carved wood. It's gorgeous. And the priest stands up here, and this is where he talks. Okay, this is where he talks to the people. And you can see this is the size of a normal person. This is the altar. It is enormous. This is the plan that was going through the mind of the people running the church at this time. They wanted to build this temple for God. The problem was that it was super expensive and they didn't have enough money. So they have to have a sale. So they have a sale and they start to sell something called indulgences. Now, to give you a snapshot version of what indulgences are, because we're going to talk more about them tomorrow, an indulgence was a piece of paper that you would purchase that said that you got out of purgatory. Okay? We'll discuss what purgatory is tomorrow. But for right now, before we close, next to the word indulgences, I want you to write down it's a piece of paper that would get you out of purgatory. 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 Okay? And so, with that, I will leave you for today. Make sure that you're getting your notes into your notebook so that we can keep a record and that you'll have something to study for when we're all done. Bye bye. Thank you.